So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
On the last day of spring, right? Is today the last day of spring, or is it tomorrow?
I think the solstice is about midnight tonight.
Midnight tonight. So today is the last day of spring. Yes. A big mission about to happen. And it's a beautiful, beautiful day here in Maine. Pretty nice farewell to the season. I'm going to start with case 89 from the Blue Cliff record. And the case, Yunyan asked Wohl, what does the Bodhisattva of great compassion use so many hands and eyes for? Wohl said, like someone reaching back, groping for a pillow in the middle of the night. Yun said, I understand. Wohl said, how do you understand it? Yun said, all over the body are hands and eyes. Wohl said, you've said quite a bit there, but you've only said 80% of it. Yin said, what do you say, elder brother? Wohl said, throughout the body are hands and eyes. So, of course, the Bodhisattva of great compassion that they're talking about is Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva. And if you've ever seen the statues of Avalokiteshvara, I can't do it on the screen, but there's many, many arms, right? That's how he's depicted, many, many arms. And in each arm, in each hand rather, there's an eye. And so Avalokiteshvara has many eyes. It said that those eyes are for him to see the suffering in the world. To connect to that suffering. Now, Wohl described that action of the hands and eyes as reaching for the pillow in the middle of the night. And I'm sure we've had that experience, right? You know, for whatever reason, we're a little uncomfortable. We turn over, you know, the pillow has slipped away and we reach and grab for the pillow. This is such a beautiful metaphor for the working of compassion. Because when we reach for that pillow, are we analyzing? Are we comparing? You know, do I want the pillow like right over here or maybe over there? Do I really need to make this move or not make this move? You know, do we bring our intellectual faculties to bear in some debate? Do we pull out our ruler and measure, making sure we get it in the precise location? No, our arms just reaches out automatically. No thought engaged in the process. And this is a beautiful way of understanding the process of compassion. Compassion is the completely natural working of our original nature, of our Buddha nature. Nothing is added. Doug and I had a discussion about this week, compassion versus empathy. We might throw love in there. The difference between compassion and empathy. What's the difference between compassion and love. I like to use Peter uses an example of compassion, which is not dissimilar, sounds very dissimilar, but it's very similar to the pillow in the night. Peter says, if you see a child running in front of a car, what do? Again, do you analyze the event? Use the intellect. Get out your computer, calculate the trajectory and speed of the car and the trajectory and speed of the child and how many feet away you are? Or do you rush out and save the child? You grab them and pull them out of harm's way completely automatically. That is the working of compassion. That is the working of our original nature. Empathy would be very different. If I were being empathic, I might think, boy, it's going to really suck for that kid when they get hit by that car. That's going to really hurt. I can feel their pain. That's empathy. We put ourselves in the other shoes. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with empathy. There's a lot right with empathy. I want to contrast it here with compassion, because these things often get conflated, and there really is a valuable and important distinction. And the same would be true of love. Going to that Peter's example. There's that car speeding along. I love that child. They're such a wonderful child. It's a precious, youthful life. Oh my God, they're gone. Right? Love and empathy are very different. And it's harder for us to see that distinction in this culture because, for example, Christianity, which is sort of the dominant religious spiritual paradigm, talks a lot about love. Right? As far as I've never really studied the New Testament, but Jesus talked about love, not about passion. So in this, we understand love, and we understand empathy, and we have a much more difficulty understanding compassion. The fundamental difference is that the ego is not involved in compassion. There is no I in the process of compassion, no me. Just like moving the pillow and it's like saving the child from the car, it's automatic. It is an expression of our Buddha nature. It is before thought, it's before ideas, it's before all the cognitive structures. It is a spontaneous reaction. Might be another way of putting it. Now, for compassion to work, that means that we have to be out of the way. Or in another sense, we have to be in a state of intimacy or non-separation. Our ego obscures the working of compassion. We cannot be compassionate. For compassion to flow, we must not be present. in the sense of my identification as an ego, as a separate being, as a separate person. Compassion only exists in a state of non-separation. And unlike empathy or love, passion is not an emotion. Compassion is not an emotion. It is an absence of emotion. It is direct connecting with another being, or whatever the situation is. It is not going through the filter of my feelings, of my knowledge, of my awareness. And so in that sense, compassion is very cool. It seems to me cool. It doesn't have the heat of emotion. Right? Love, that's an emotion. Compassion, that's not there. It's very cool. Nor is compassion always being nice. Compassion is responding to the situation without ego and therefore with skillful means. Skillful means. Skillful means is the natural working of our mind appropriate to time, person, place, and circumstances. Again, if it's that child is being, the cars of the child, there's only one action that's appropriate to that time, place, circumstances. Maybe there's more than one, but the one that occurs to me is you got to save the child, right? And it's the appropriate action. And so the action of compassion is always the appropriate action. It is always through skillful means. And so it may not be the loving action. It may not be the empathic reaction. You know, we look back on these stories, the Zen teachers whacking their students. And we judge that through our temporary lens. And we say, oh, that was, that's abusive. It's not okay. And certainly in today's world, that's the case. But in their time, I believe those teachers were acting from compassion. They weren't sadistic. They weren't playing head games with the student. They were bonding in the moment, and that moment needed that student. They were helping that student to wake up. Being compassionate with someone who's an alcoholic may not be giving them hugs and telling them how much we love them, but getting them in the car and getting them to a detox center, right? And so I just want to make these distinctions very clear. Compassion is the natural working of our fundamental nature, our Buddha nature. So then Yin and Wu get into this question about where are the hands and the eyes. And Yin says, all over the body are hands and eyes. And Wu says, you have said quite a bit there, but you've only said 80% of it. Yin said, what do you say, elder brother? Throughout the body are hands and eyes. Now this sound a little academic to me. whether the hands and knives are all over the body or throughout the body. But again, they point to the nature. Compassion is deep within us. It is not separate from our being. It is our being. When we are unobstructed by ego, when we are obstructed by our needs and desires, our fears, hopes, all of the things that preoccupy us most of the time. We need to be in a state of great clarity to experience and to manifest compassion. Compassion is a substrate of the universe. It's always there. It's always there with us. It's always everywhere. We don't always see it. We struggle with things, in nature, the workings of nature are always compassionate. And yet Zell that gets eaten by the lion may not see that. Because again, compassion, not the same as love. Not the same as empathy. In a sense, compassion is the working of the Tao, of the way. And when we are open, when our awareness is open, then we are part of that way. We are expressing it. Okay, well, let me pause there and see what questions you guys have about that.
I have two questions. One is compassion another name for our Buddha nature? And then the other question is compassion instinct? Just moving for the child is instinctual.
Well, let's take that in two parts. And the part you asked me was
Buddha nature.
Repeat it again.
Is compassion
good?
the same
Okay.
as Buddha nature?
Compassion is the expression of Buddha nature. It's the manifestation of Buddha nature. Okay. So Buddha nature is empty until it manifests as action in the world. Compassion is that nature manifesting action in the world. Okay. And the second question, the second part of the question?
Is compassion instinct?
Good. No, self-preservation is instinct, right? Our first reaction often, don't save that kid because I could get killed, right? That's self-preservation. And that's a primal instinct. So in some ways, in some situations, compassionate action may be going against our most fundamental and survive. One of the most, whatever you think of this, one of the most striking examples in modern history of Buddhists responding to suffering in the world were the Vietnam monks who self-immolated. I saw some images of that again recently. whatever we may think of it, in geopolitical terms, ecological terms, and all those other terms, here's this extraordinary act of totally ignoring self-preservation, totally ignoring the most horrifying pain imaginable, the most, awful death imaginable, in the interest of compassion. Really extraordinary.
I definitely see the Buddha nature as being the manifestation of compassion. For the instinct of our self-preservation, how when the child's running towards the car, how do we overcome our own self-interest, our instinct to protect ourselves, versus shifting to compassion if there's no intention to do that?
We're right back. We're just back to the in the night. It has to be before thought, with analysis. Before, once I have the thought, oh, I could get killed. Now I'm in a whole different space, right? And I may hesitate. In fact, I may get myself killed because I'm going, oh, I don't know, and then I run and I'm too late, But so it has a truly compassionate act precedes thought analysis. We're not weighing pros and cons. We're not, which may lead to the question, is compassion always the right thing? That's me. I'm asking that, and you guys are going to answer it.
The perfect way is only for those who do not pick and choose. So right thing, wrong thing.
So are you saying that
thing.
so that we can't err if we're coming from that space of Buddha nature of compassion?
I'm sorry, that we can't make an error? Making an error is making a judgment that something's wrong.
What is an error?
What is an error? Good. What is an error?
There's an expression I came across years ago in readings, which was idiot compassion. Has anyone heard that? Peter, have you heard that? Idiot compassion? There's Margaret nodding. And I understand it to mean perhaps a short-sighted compassion, maybe a knee-jerk reaction. Now maybe I'm saying too much, but there's my answer to your question, that there can be a compassion, a gesture of compassion that's not seeing clearly, not seeing far enough. Margaret, do you have thoughts on that?
I always heard it as lacking in wisdom, and compassion and wisdom have to balance each other.
That brings to mind a question I wanted to ask. Years ago, someone mentioned regarding the two traditions, Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, that the Tibetans and the Zen Buddhists are going to the same place. It's just that the Tibetans are going from the path of compassion and the Zen Buddhists are going from the path of wisdom. I thought it was kind of a simplistic notion. The fed into the sort of the cliches that we have with those traditions, but I still find it interesting. And I'm just interested in people's thoughts. My own is that I found it to be a false distinction. It seems to me that compassion and wisdom would be completely overlapping. But based on what you just said, Margaret, about the balance, I'm curious what others might think about this.
Well, I think then you're getting into conceptualization and separation. I have a question about, I'll share an experience and I've applied it to myself. Because I feel we have to have compassion for our own bodies too, and our own selves. And this was many years ago. I was going to a Chan Dharma Center after Steph had left, and I was working with children who were in deep trouble. My job was to see if they needed to go to the hospital because they were in so much pain and suicidal and things like that. And I asked him, "What do I do?" He said, "Be totally in the present moment with them. Just that's all you can do, is be totally present with them." And to me, if I drop, being present means dropping away all the distinctions and also being present with them for what they have, what's going on with them. And then I kind of understood that. Is that understanding to me? If I'm totally present in the moment, then the action will happen, as you say, spontaneously. But being present in the moment, is that kind of like what you're referring to? To be compassionate? Because if you bring in all this other stuff, all the self-referencing and all that other stuff, can you be present with that moment, with that person or that situation? And so I'd like to know your thoughts on that. And then, and compassion, are you willing to drop away and make sacrifice? Okay, that's my question. Does it have to be doing with the present moment?
Yeah, good questions. I want to just back up slightly. What's the Buddhist definition of wisdom?
No, I don't know. I get it changes. I mean,
Anybody?
An appropriate response,
no.
maybe.
Yeah, look, wisdom. What is the sword? Manjushri is the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and he's carrying a sword. What is that sword that he's carrying?
Cut away the bullshit. Excuse me.
The delusions. It's this. Bullshit works. It's cutting through our delusive thoughts. It's not, studying all the sutras or, some kind of actual intellectual wisdom. It's cutting through our delusions. That's the meaning about when we're saying, and in fact, wisdom is the gateway to compassion, right? We have to let go of our delusions to be open and compassionate and not holding and attached to our own ego. We have to, as you just said, your names are Jim. They not.
I go by Jim in America and James in Thailand. Someday I'll tell you the reason why.
All right. Well, you're in Thailand now.
No, I'm in North Carolina now. I mean, I'm in North Carolina, so I'm Jim.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Welcome. Okay, great. Anyway, now I've completely bobbled up my thoughts,
sorry.
even more than they usually are. But that's it was me. I did it. But anyway, so in a sense, wisdom and are identical. They are not two different things, right? They are two different expressions of this non-separation, of this complete intimacy, of being, you talk about it in terms of full involvement, being fully involved, not a spectator, not a participant, but a fully involved being.
Peter,
That's where compassion. Go ahead.
Peter, earlier you identified compassion with the Tao and used the example, you know, the zebra that's being eaten by the lion may not feel like the lion was being compassionate, you know. And so, but I'm wondering if, you know, the word compassion, maybe if it's identified with the Tao, it may be, it seems like it may be a little bit confusing because, you know, we're thinking of compassion. We saved the child because he's running into the street, because that's our nature as human beings. But one lizard does not care what's happening to another lizard, you know, and they are expressing the Tao too. And a lion will eat a zebra, and the zebra is suffering horribly while that is happening. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
So deer is standing in front of your car. It's because it's not a human, you hesitate to hit it.
I think
We extend compassion to the whole universe, Gary.
as humans, we would not want to kill a deer unnecessarily, but, you know, a lion would eat it, you know, and so that's its nature. But our nature is, it seems to be that just the way we're wired, we feel this compassion, but it seems to do with our human nature.
See, I don't think so. I understand what you're saying. And Margaret, do you have a thought?
I have a sort of a question. I've struggled with this for years because there are two aspects. The story in the Zen tradition is of Jizo, who goes down into the hell realms, and there are little children there who have died before their parents, and they're in hell because they have died before their parents, and therefore they're not able to care for their elderly parents. And they're having to break all these rocks, and it's awful. And Jizo does not change their situation beyond covering them with his robes when the overseer comes. And when the overseer leaves, the children are right back in the same mess. That's a Zen story, supposedly of compassion. In the Tibetan, or with the Avalokiteshvara, I have been in places where that figure is enormous, and the hands are truly thousands, and the eyes are there, and the figure hears the cries of the world or sees, but there's no action. And you know, maybe it's coming out of the Western world, but I find it disconcerting. And there are times, of course, perhaps, when the compassionate thing is not to act. But I find myself torn with this.
Oh, thank you for sharing, being torn. That's what we should all be torn with this. That's wonderful. I mean, this is, you know, but again, I keep coming back, you know, the understanding that any action or certain type of action has to be the compassionate response is not understanding compassion. Compassion is the automatic response. It's the immediate response. It's the response that arises out of non-separation. And so might every one of us do something different? Yeah, I think so. I think so. You know, I mean, certain circumstances, like the car example that I use, is so exigent, the only one solution. But more often than not, there are many possibilities. And they could all be compassionate possibilities if they arise spontaneously out of the moment, out of our nature in immediacy. which is a little different. When we use human nature, we're talking about something different, right?
So I think part of the dilemma is that we can't define our level we can't define our own level of wisdom. So we act as best we can with trust that we're doing our best and trust that that's our emerging compassion. But we're not unattached, we're not pure. We aspire to it. And that's our compassion.
Well, you're absolutely right. The lotus blooms in muddy water, right? And we are all in the muddy water, and there is not absolute clarity on these things. And our actions are probably almost never perfect. But the closer we are to that substrate compassion, the less obscured it is by our ego, the more likely it's to be, I don't even know if I want to say the best course of action, to be the compassion course of action. Maybe compassion isn't always the best course of action. I'm trying to think that one. I'm not sure. But, but we could get it, uncompassionate response might be a compassionate response under certain circumstances.
Does
You
it,
know,
does compassion involve, maybe what I'm thinking, compassion involves detachment. And that's pretty hard to be able to feel. It's kind of what you're saying about love, but they talk about, some people talk about to detach with love. And that's like, how can you detach? I mean, sometimes acting with compassion is an act of letting go and letting what karma or whatever be revealed. But it's what you're saying. It's hard to, I'm having a hard time wrapping. I don't feel I really want to wrap my mind around compassion. I mean, something I want to just, it's so hard. I mean, and I like what in China, Xin is the word for mind and heart, and they're the same word. And so so yeah, because I've witnessed many years ago, I worked before I became a teacher, I worked as a clerk in intensive care in Detroit. And I saw many people where doctors had to make a compassionate decision. And that meant stopping, letting it go. And they had to do it. We had to behave in order to be more compassionate, we had to behave in a detached way. And it was, I still hold those memories with me. I didn't know I know a little bit about Buddhism, so what is, they're bringing up the idea of compassion and detachment. It's can you respond to that?
compassion is attached because it's detached from my ego. It's detached from my agendas. It's detached from my thoughts and feelings. And that's why I say it's sort of cool. And it might be, I was thinking about it, let's think of a different example. Let's think of the physician who's just diagnosed a person with terminal cancer, right? So, what's the compassionate response? It's appropriate to place, person, as me would want to know. I'd want you to tell me, okay, Peter, this is it. You got 4 months to live, but there are other people who that would not be compassionate. And it was, that allowing them to have those 4 months thinking that they're gone is the best possible outcome for them. And so, and we can't judge that. We can't really even know that. So that moment, that physician, they're going to go with what their compassion tells them. And they see this person in front of them who's so frail and so fragile and so emotionally damaged that to tell them, oh, by the way, you've only got 4 months to live, would just destroy them. Whereas somebody else to tell them is, I'd be like, thank you, doctor. I appreciate you've been so honest with me. I don't like the news, but I need to know because I want time to prepare, etc. So who knows what again, the compassion is so specific. It's hard to come up with formulaic answers or understandings. It happens right there in the moment. And presumably if the doctor in that instance is coming from compassion, they're not thinking about it. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to feel like a real shit if I tell this person they're dying, or, they're just like, this is what this person needs right now. I'm going to give them what they need.
I'm moved to share a perspective as we get to this. In the story, in the transition from hands and eyes all over the body to hands and eyes throughout the body, where I go is those hands and eyes are not just up to me. Those hands and eyes are everywhere. They're in the flowers and beings around this house. They're everywhere on this screen. And in a practical matter, a key lesson for me in working when I worked in end-of-life care, it was never just up to me. I mean, the world of the patient and the family wasn't just on my shoulders. It was a space that we were all sharing and a process that we were all sharing, the patient, the family, team. So I think, if we start getting into splitting hairs about compassion, what compassion is, then it's a hair's breadth of difference, and heaven and earth are already separated. It's a living, breathing process that's all around us right this second.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, the minute that we separate, right? I mean, another way that intimacy can be described is immersed in the moment, immersed in the situation, immersed in the tears and the laughter, immersed, whatever it is. And we're not stepping back, we're not judging, and we're not analyzing, and as you say, Brad, and I think it's right, we're taking in the thing. I like that about the eyes, and, we're taking in everything. And we're respecting as everything. Right? Yeah. So I'm looking at the time, and as wonderful as this discussion is, I'm also aware that it's Father's Day and people may have other things they want to get on to. So being the great passionate being that I am, I'm going to suggest that we our vows and go on with our days.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
So one last question. Doug and Carol, where in the universe are you guys this morning?
Good morning and greetings from the Vince Lombardi rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Say hi to Vince, please.
Thank you, everyone.
He showed lots of compassion to the other team.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Everybody have a good day.
Take care.